The crimson dawn of Kepler 442b painted the crystalline spires of the Zephyrian capital in shades of blood and hope. Queen Lysura stood on her palace balcony, her iridescent wings catching the alien sunlight as she watched the morning ritual of her people. Below, thousands of Zephyrians moved through the floating gardens that defied gravity, their own wings creating a symphony of colors that would have brought tears to human eyes. Lysara's telepathic abilities, enhanced by the neural crown that had been passed down through 50 generations of her lineage, allowed her to feel the contentment of her subjects. After 3 years of alliance with the humans of Earth, prosperity had returned to Zephyros. Trade routes flourished, technology advanced at unprecedented rates, and, most importantly, the constant threat of the Dominion had seemed to fade into memory. The Queen's chief advisor, General Kethril, approached with measured steps. His scarred face told stories of countless battles, and his missing left wing bore testament to his sacrifice during the final assault on the Dominion's border fortress. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying both respect and concern, "the human diplomatic vessel has arrived ahead of schedule." Lysara turned from the balcony, her expression brightening. The humans fascinated her beyond measure. Unlike her own people, who communicated through a combination of telepathy and harmonic frequencies, humans relied entirely on verbal communication and body language. Yet somehow, they had proven to be the most reliable allies the Zephyrian Empire had ever known. "Excellent," she replied, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I trust Ambassador Chun has brought news from Earth's High Council." "Indeed, Your Majesty. However, there's something else. Our deep space sensors have detected unusual movement in the void sector. Ships bearing unknown signatures, moving in formation toward our outer territories." The Queen's wings dimmed slightly, a biological response to stress that her people had evolved over millennia. The void sector had been empty for decades, ever since the collapse of the ancient civilization that once inhabited those dark worlds. How many vessels? At least 30, possibly more. They're using some form of stealth technology that interferes with our scans. Kethril paused, his own wings betraying his nervousness. "Your Majesty, their energy signatures, they're unlike anything we've encountered before." Before Lysara could respond, a tremor ran through the palace structure. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable, but her enhanced senses detected the disturbance in the gravitational fields that kept the floating city aloft. Emergency klaxons began wailing throughout the capital, their piercing cries sending flocks of native sky dancers fleeing toward the mountains. "Battle stations," the Queen commanded, her voice carrying across the palace through the neural network that connected all Zephyrian military personnel. "Recall all patrol squadrons and raise the planetary defense grid." As if summoned by her words, a massive shadow fell across the capital. Lysara looked up to see something that defied comprehension. A ship, if it could be called that, stretched across nearly half the sky. Its surface seemed to absorb light itself, creating a void in the heavens that hurt to look at directly. Strange geometric patterns pulsed along its hull, patterns that seemed to shift and change when observed, causing disorientation in anyone who stared too long. "By the ancient winds," Kethril whispered. "What is that thing?" The answer came not in words, but in action. Beams of sickly yellow energy lanced down from the massive vessel, striking the planetary defense stations with surgical precision. Each impact sent shockwaves through the crystalline structures of the city, shattering windows and causing several of the smaller floating platforms to lose altitude. Lysara's tactical training, honed through years of warfare against the Dominion, kicked into overdrive. "General, coordinate our fighter squadrons for defensive formation Alpha 7. Contact the human diplomatic vessel and request immediate assistance. Signal our colonial worlds to activate their emergency protocols." But even as she issued orders, the Queen realized they were facing something far beyond their experience. The enemy ship's weapons seemed to target their technology specifically, disabling rather than destroying. Their own fighters, magnificent creatures of Zephyrian engineering that combined organic neural networks with quantum crystalline power cores, simply shut down when they approached the vessel. Pilots reported complete system failures, as if their ships had simply forgotten how to fly. "Your Majesty," came a voice through the neural network. It was Captain Thyrus, commander of the elite Royal Guard Squadron. "Our weapons won't lock onto the target. Every time we achieve target acquisition, our systems reset. It's as if something is rewriting our ship's programming in real time." The situation deteriorated rapidly. Smaller vessels began deploying from the massive ship, each one roughly the size of a Zephyrian cruiser, but moving with impossible agility. They ignored the defensive fire completely, weaving through the attacks as if they could predict exactly where each shot would be fired. Lysara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. This wasn't a conventional attack. The enemy was demonstrating technology that surpassed anything in known space. They were being systematically neutralized, their defenses rendered useless not through overwhelming firepower, but through technological superiority that bordered on the supernatural. "The human vessel," she said urgently. "Can they assist?" Kethral's expression was grim. Ambassador Chen reports they're experiencing similar system failures. Their artificial intelligence systems have gone offline, and their weapons are non-responsive. However, they've managed to transmit a distress signal through their quantum communication array before it was compromised. A new sound filled the air, a low harmonic that seemed to resonate with the quantum frequencies of Zephyrian technology. Throughout the city, defensive systems began shutting down one by one. Transportation platforms lost power, causing several to crash into the lower levels of the city. Communication networks fell silent. Even the biological enhancements that Zephyrians had integrated with their technology began to malfunction. "They're not trying to destroy us," Lysara realized, her voice filled with growing dread. "They're trying to capture us." The truth of her words became apparent as the smaller vessels began deploying what could only be described as energy nets. These constructs of pure force enveloped groups of Zephyrian fighters, rendering their occupants unconscious but alive. The patterns were precise, methodical, and utterly ruthless in their efficiency. "Your Majesty," Kethral said, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining composure, "I respectfully request that you evacuate to the emergency bunkers. The palace's defensive systems are failing, and I believe you are their primary target." Lysara's wings flared with indignation. "I will not abandon my people in their hour of need, General. We stand together, or we fall together." But even as she spoke, she could feel the enemy's influence pressing against her mind. The neural crown that connected her to her people was being used against her, turned into a conduit for something alien and wrong. She could sense the invaders probing her thoughts, learning about her people's weaknesses, their technology, their fears. Fighting against the mental intrusion with every ounce of her considerable willpower, Lysara managed to send one final message through the neural network. "Remember who you are. Remember what we fight for. And trust in our human allies. They will come for us." The last thing she saw before the energy field enveloped her was the human diplomatic vessel, the Earth ship Harmony, erupting in a brilliant flash of light as its crew activated what appeared to be some form of self-destruct sequence rather than allow their technology to be captured. The enemy had won the first battle, but as consciousness faded, Queen Lysara held on to a single thought. Humanity had survived countless wars, disasters, and seemingly impossible odds throughout their history. If anyone could find a way to mount a rescue against impossible odds, it would be the stubborn, resourceful, and utterly unpredictable humans of Earth. 3 days after the attack on Zephyros, the emergency session of Earth's High Council convened in the underground chambers beneath Geneva. The normally pristine conference room buzzed with tension as representatives from every major Earth nation, along with leaders from the lunar colonies and Mars settlements, gathered around the holographic display showing the last known position of the Zephyrian homeworld. Admiral Sarah Martinez, commander of Earth's combined fleet, stood before the assembly with the bearing of someone who had spent 30 years turning humanity's ragtag collection of exploration vessels into a formidable space force. Her weathered face showed the strain of the past 72 hours, during which she had coordinated the largest military mobilization in human history. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice cutting through the murmur of conversations. "3 days ago, we lost contact with the Zephyrian Empire. The last transmission from Ambassador Chin's vessel indicated an attack by unknown forces using technology far advanced beyond anything in our databases. The ship's AI managed to transmit tactical data before going offline, and what we've learned is deeply troubling. The holographic display shifted to show the massive vessel that had appeared over Zephyros. Even in the static images captured by the Harmony's sensors, the ship seemed to hurt the eyes to look at directly. Geometric patterns flowed across its surface like living things, and its sheer size dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's leading expert on xenotechnology, leaned forward in her chair. "Admiral, our analysis of the sensor data suggests that this vessel operates on principles we don't understand. The energy signatures are consistent with technology that manipulates quantum reality itself. They're not just advanced, they're operating on a completely different level of physics. Which is exactly why we're going to rescue them," came a voice from the back of the room. All heads turned to see General Marcus Thompson, the legendary commander who had led humanity's forces during the devastating Martian rebellion 15 years earlier. His reputation preceded him into any room, and his presence here meant that Earth's leadership was taking this threat seriously. Thompson strode to the front of the room, his artificial leg clicking against the metal floor. He had lost the original in a bombing on Europa, but had refused medical retirement, instead using the incident as motivation to become even more effective in combat. "I've read the preliminary reports, and I've studied every piece of data we have on these attackers. Yes, they have superior technology. Yes, they've apparently captured our allies with ease. And yes, any conventional assault would be suicide." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "But there's something these invaders don't understand about humanity. We don't play by the rules. We never have. When the odds are impossible, when the enemy is stronger, when conventional tactics fail, that's when humans do what we do best. We get creative." Admiral Martinez nodded approvingly. "General Thompson has volunteered to lead a joint task force comprising elements from every branch of Earth's military, along with volunteers from the colonial forces. However, I want to be absolutely clear about what we're facing. According to our xenobiologists, the Zephyrians are among the most technologically advanced species we've encountered. If they were defeated this easily, we're dealing with an enemy that operates on a level we can barely comprehend." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Zephyrian Empire had been humanity's first major alien ally, and their technology had revolutionized human space travel and communication. Their defeat represented not just a military catastrophe, but potentially the end of human expansion into the galaxy. Dr. Vasquez activated her own holographic display, showing comparative analyses of human and Zephyrian technology. However, there may be factors working in our favor. Human technology developed along a completely different path than Zephyrian systems. Where they integrated biological and quantum technologies, we focused on mechanical and digital solutions. It's possible that our systems might be less susceptible to whatever caused their defeat. It's more than possible, interrupted Dr. James Park, Earth's chief AI researcher. I've been analyzing the data from the Harmony's final transmission. The enemy's attack seems specifically designed to target hybrid bioquantum systems like those used by the Zephyrians. Our purely mechanical and digital systems might actually have an advantage. General Thompson smiled grimly. Which brings us to our strategy. We're not going to fight them on their terms. We're going to do what humans have always done when facing superior opponents. We're going to cheat. Over the next several hours, the assembled leaders hammered out the details of what would become known as Operation Longshot. The plan was audacious to the point of madness, relying on human ingenuity, determination, and willingness to take risks that any sane species would consider suicidal. The task force would consist of 12 vessels, each one representing the pinnacle of human engineering and crewed by volunteers who understood they might not return. But, more importantly, each ship would carry something that no other species in known space possessed: the uniquely human combination of creativity, stubbornness, and absolute refusal to accept defeat. As the meeting broke up, Admiral Martinez pulled General Thompson aside. "Marcus, I have to ask, do you really think we can pull this off?" The general looked at the holographic display, still showing the enemy vessel, then back at the admiral. "Sarah, 3 years ago, the Zephyrians saved our colony ships from a Dominion attack force 3 times our size. They didn't hesitate, didn't calculate odds, didn't worry about the political implications. They just came because we were their allies, and we needed help." He paused, his expression hardening with resolve. "Now it's our turn, and I'll be damned if humanity is going to let our friends down when they need us most. We're going to get Queen Lysara back, even if we have to tear that alien ship apart bolt by bolt to do it." Unknown to the humans planning their desperate rescue mission, Queen Lysara existed in a state of semi-conscious awareness aboard the enemy vessel. The ship itself defied conventional understanding, its interior spaces seeming to shift and flow like living tissue. Gravity operated according to rules that changed from corridor to corridor, and the very air seemed to whisper with voices speaking in languages that predated known civilization. She found herself in what could generously be called a cell, though the term inadequately described the complex energy field that surrounded her. The barrier allowed her to see and hear, but prevented any movement beyond a small central area. More troubling was its effect on her telepathic abilities. The neural crown still functioned, but its signals were being intercepted and analyzed by something that felt distinctly non-organic. Her captors had not revealed themselves directly, but Lysara had caught glimpses of movement in the shadows beyond her cell. They were tall, angular beings that seemed to be composed more of crystallized energy than flesh and bone. When they moved, reality itself seemed to bend around them, creating visual distortions that made accurate observation nearly impossible. Through the complex network of energy fields that permeated the ship, she could sense other prisoners. Thousands of her people were held in similar confinement, their minds being systematically explored and cataloged. The process was not painful exactly, but it felt like violation on a fundamental level. These beings were dissecting everything that made the Zephyrians who they were. But there was something her captors didn't understand about the alliance between Zephyros and Earth. The neural crown that connected her to her people also contained quantum communication protocols that had been jointly developed with human engineers. Hidden beneath layers of biological neural networks was a purely mechanical transmission system, one that operated on principles these energy beings might not recognize. Slowly, carefully, Queen Lysara began to activate the emergency protocols that she and Ambassador Chun had developed during the early days of the Alliance. The message would be simple, transmitted on quantum frequencies that would travel faster than light, and hopefully reach Earth before her captors could detect and stop it. The message contained 3 critical pieces of information: her location, the weaknesses she had observed in the enemy vessel, and, most importantly, a complete analysis of how their technology worked to disable biological and quantum systems. If the humans were planning a rescue, and she had faith that they would need every advantage she could provide. As the transmission completed, Queen Lysara felt a moment of satisfaction. Her captors might have superior technology, might understand physics on a level that dwarfed Zephyrian science, but they had made one critical error. They had underestimated the power of friendship, loyalty, and the absolute certainty that somewhere among the stars, her human allies were already planning the impossible. The quantum message from Queen Lysara reached Earth's deep space communication array at 0347 hours, Geneva time. Dr. James Park was pulling his third consecutive all-nighter in the AI research lab when the priority alert chimed through the facility speakers. The message was brief, encrypted with quantum keys that only he and Ambassador Chen possessed, and contained information that would change everything about Operation Longshot. Park's hands trembled slightly as he decoded the transmission. Queen Lysara was alive, along with thousands of her people, but they were being held aboard a vessel that existed partially outside normal space-time. More importantly, she had identified the fundamental weakness in the enemy's seemingly invincible technology. They operated by manipulating quantum probability fields, effectively rewriting reality to suit their needs. But this manipulation required enormous computational power, and more critically, it was specifically designed to interface with biological and hybrid quantum systems. Admiral Martinez, to the Communications Center, Priority Alpha. Park announced through the intercom, his voice betraying both excitement and terror at the implications of what he had discovered. Within minutes, the Emergency Command Center buzzed with activity. Admiral Martinez stood before the main display, flanked by General Thompson and Dr. Vasquez, as Park explained the intelligence windfall. According to Queen Lysara's analysis, Park began, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The enemy ship exists in a state of quantum flux. They can alter probability itself to ensure their weapons hit while ours miss, their defenses hold while ours fail. But this requires constant computational adjustment based on real-time analysis of their opponent's technology. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward, her expression intense, which explains why Zephyrian hybrid bioquantum systems were so easily compromised. The enemy's computers could interface directly with those technologies, essentially hacking them at the quantum level. Exactly, Park continued. But human technology developed along purely mechanical and digital lines. Our computers don't operate on quantum principles. They use electrical impulses and magnetic storage. Our weapons are chemical explosives and electromagnetic projectiles. We're essentially invisible to their computational analysis. General Thompson's scarred face split into a predatory grin. So you're telling me that our primitive, backward technology is actually an advantage? More than an advantage, General. It's potentially the key to victory. But there's more. Park activated another display, showing the complex energy patterns that Queen Lysara had detected aboard the enemy vessel. Their ship is powered by what she describes as a probability engine that draws energy from quantum uncertainty itself. If we could disrupt that engine, the entire vessel would be forced back into normal space-time, where it would be vulnerable to conventional attack. Admiral Martinez studied the data for long moments before speaking. What do we need to make this work? Everything. Park replied without hesitation. Every ship we can muster, every weapon we can carry, and a lot of luck. But most importantly, we need to completely redesign our approach. Instead of trying to fight them with advanced technology, we go in with the most basic primitive equipment we can build. The next 72 hours saw the most intensive military preparation in human history. Across Earth's shipyards, technicians worked around the clock to strip advanced systems from the task force vessels, replacing them with older, simpler alternatives. Quantum communicators were replaced with radio transmitters. Energy weapons were swapped for chemical explosive projectiles. Advanced targeting computers gave way to mechanical calculating devices that wouldn't have been out of place in humanity's early space age. Captain Rosa Delacroix stood on the bridge of her vessel, the Indomitable, watching her crew adapt to equipment that seemed almost ancient by current standards. As one of Earth's most decorated ship commanders, she had volunteered for the mission despite knowing it might be suicide. The ship around her bore little resemblance to the sleek, modern vessel it had been a week earlier. Engineering reports all quantum systems offline and isolated, Captain, announced Lieutenant Commander Singh from the engineering station. We're running on backup fusion reactors and chemical thrusters only. Weapon status? Delacroix asked, settling into the captain's chair that had been modified to include manual controls for every ship system. All energy weapons removed and replaced with kinetic projectile systems. We've got railguns, chemical explosive missiles, and good old-fashioned bullets. Nothing fancy, nothing quantum, nothing these aliens can hack into. Delacroix nodded approvingly. The Indomitable now carried weapons that would have been familiar to military commanders from centuries past, updated only with modern materials and manufacturing techniques. If Dr. Park's theories were correct, this primitive arsenal might be exactly what they needed. Similar preparations were taking place across the task force. The flagship Endeavour had been converted into a flying arsenal of conventional weapons. The fast attack craft Mercury and Apollo had been stripped down to basic maneuvering thrusters and loaded with every chemical explosive Earth could manufacture. The heavy cruiser Constitution now carried enough kinetic projectiles to level a small moon. But the most radical modification was reserved for General Thompson's command vessel, the Phoenix. The entire ship had been reconstructed around a single, massive electromagnetic pulse device designed by Dr. Vasquez's team. If they could get close enough to the enemy vessel, the EMP would theoretically disrupt their probability engine long enough for the rest of the task force to attack. Ladies and gentlemen, General Thompson announced over the task force communication network, in exactly 6 hours, we launch for the Zephyros system. I won't lie to you about our chances. We're flying into the unknown, equipped with weapons our great-great-grandparents would recognize, against an enemy that can bend reality itself. He paused, looking out at the assembled fleet through the viewport of his bridge. 12 ships that represented humanity's desperate gamble, crewed by volunteers who understood they might not return home. But I want you to remember something. 3 years ago, when the Dominion was closing in on our colony ships, Queen Lysara didn't hesitate to come to our aid. She didn't calculate odds or worry about political consequences. She came because we were her allies and we needed help. Today, we return that favor. The launch sequence began with the precision that had become humanity's trademark in space operations. One by one, the vessels of Task Force Longshot engaged their drives and departed Earth's orbital space, heading for a rendezvous point at the edge of the solar system. From there, they would make the journey to Zephyros using conventional faster-than-light drives, avoiding the quantum tunnel networks that had made interstellar travel so efficient, but which might alert their enemies to their approach. During the 3-day journey, the crews drilled constantly with their primitive equipment. Veterans who had commanded fleets using thought-controlled interfaces had to relearn the fundamentals of manual targeting and mechanical navigation. Engineers who were accustomed to reality-bending quantum technologies worked with slide rules and analog computers. Dr. Park, aboard the Endeavour, as the task force's chief scientist, spent his time analyzing every scrap of data from Queen Lysara's transmission. The enemy vessel was massive beyond comprehension, potentially containing millions of the crystalline beings that served as its crew. But size would work against them if their probability engine could be disrupted. The larger the ship, the more energy required to maintain its quantum phase state. Admiral, Park reported during the final day of transit, I've completed my analysis of the target vessel's quantum signature. If our EMP attack succeeds in disrupting their probability engine, they'll have approximately 47 minutes to restore it before the ship's mass forces it back into normal space-time permanently. Admiral Martinez, reviewing tactical displays on her bridge, nodded grimly. 47 minutes to rescue Queen Lysara and as many Zephyrians as possible, then get clear before they can restore their systems. Assuming we can penetrate their defenses in the first place, added General Thompson from his position aboard the Phoenix. And assuming our primitive weapons can actually damage them once they're vulnerable. They can, came an unexpected voice over the communication channel. It was Captain Chen Wei, the son of the ambassador who had died aboard the Harmony. He had volunteered to command one of the fast attack craft, despite having every reason to avoid the mission that might avenge his father's death. I've been studying the design philosophy of those energy beings. They've become so dependent on their reality manipulation technology that they've never developed conventional defenses. Their hull plating is designed to deflect energy weapons and absorb quantum attacks, but it won't stop a good old-fashioned explosive projectile. As the task force approached the Zephyros system, long-range sensors began detecting the enemy presence. The massive vessel still hung in orbit around the Zephyrian homeworld, but it was no longer alone. Smaller ships, each one the size of a human battlecruiser, patrolled the system in complex patterns that seemed to follow some form of multidimensional mathematics. 12 patrol vessels, reported the sensor operator aboard the Endeavor. They're using the same reality distortion technology as the primary target, but on a much smaller scale. Energy signatures suggest they're drawing power from the main vessel. Admiral Martinez felt a cold smile cross her face, which means if we take out the primary target, the patrol ships lose their power source. "Ma'am," came another voice from the sensor station, "I'm detecting massive energy readings from the planetary surface. It looks like they're strip mining the entire world, extracting something from the quantum crystalline structures that make up Zephyrian cities." The news hit the task force like a physical blow. The enemy wasn't just capturing the Zephyrians. They were harvesting their entire civilization, stripping away the quantum crystal technology that had taken millennia to develop. Time was running out not just for Queen Lysara, but for an entire species. "All ships, battle stations," Admiral Martinez commanded. "We going fast and hard." Phoenix takes point and delivers the EMP strike. The moment their defenses go down, every ship launches everything they've got. "We get one chance at this, people. Let's make it count." As the human fleet began its approach toward the enemy vessel, sensors aboard the alien ship detected their presence. But the readings made no sense to the crystalline beings who served as its crew. The approaching vessels registered as primitive mechanical constructs, so basic that they barely qualified as spacecraft. Their weapons were simple chemical and kinetic systems that posed no conceivable threat to a vessel that could manipulate reality itself. The enemy commander, a being of pure, crystallized energy that had existed for longer than human civilization, dismissed the approaching ships as insignificant. Let the primitives come. Their technology was so backward that the ship's defensive systems couldn't even lock onto them properly. They would be destroyed easily once they came within range. But deep within the ship's holding areas, Queen Lysara felt the approach of the human fleet through her hidden quantum communicator. A smile crossed her features for the first time since her capture. Her human friends were coming, armed with nothing but courage, determination, and weapons that her captors would never see coming. The final battle for Zephyros was about to begin, and for the first time in 3 days, Queen Lysara allowed herself to hope. The human task force approached the enemy vessel like ancient warriors charging in a battle against gods. General Thompson watched from the bridge of the Phoenix as the massive alien ship grew larger on his primitive optical view screen, its reality-bending hull creating visual distortions that made accurate measurement impossible. But he didn't need accurate measurements. He just needed to get close enough to deliver humanity's electromagnetic punch. Distance to target, 2 million kilometers, and closing, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the navigation station, her hands steady on manual controls that hadn't been used in combat for over a century. "Enemy patrol vessels are altering course to intercept." "Let them come," Thompson replied, his voice carrying across the task force communication network. "All ships, remember the plan. We're not here to fight their escorts. We punch through, deliver the payload, and extract our people. Everything else is secondary." The first enemy patrol vessel opened fire at a distance of 1 million kilometers. Beams of twisted energy that seemed to bend space itself reached out toward the approaching human fleet, but something unprecedented happened. Instead of the precise, reality-altering strikes that had devastated Zephyrian forces, the weapons simply missed. The targeting computers aboard the alien vessel couldn't establish proper locks on the human ships because their technology didn't register as sophisticated enough to warrant advanced countermeasures. Captain Delacroix, commanding the Indomitable, watched in amazement as energy beams that could have vaporized her vessel passed harmlessly to either side. "They can't hit us," she announced over the communication network, disbelief evident in her voice. "Their weapons are designed for enemies using quantum technology. We're too primitive for their systems to target effectively." But the aliens adapted quickly. The patrol vessels began switching to more basic attack patterns, firing spread shots designed to saturate areas of space rather than target specific vessels. The human fleet found itself flying through a maze of deadly energy, relying on the piloting skills of crews who had trained for exactly this kind of desperate situation. "Phoenix to all vessels," Thompson announced as a ship shook under the impact of a near miss. "Execute pattern Delta. We're going in." The 12 ships of Task Force Longshots suddenly scattered into a complex, three-dimensional formation that would have been impossible to coordinate using quantum communication networks. But the humans were using old-fashioned radio transmissions and visual signals, methods so primitive that the enemy's jamming systems couldn't interfere with them. Dr. Park, monitoring the approach from his position aboard the Endeavour, watched as the massive alien vessel began to respond to their presence. Energy fields that could twist reality itself started forming around its hull, preparing to defend against the kinds of advanced weapons that every other species in the galaxy would use. "Admiral," Park reported, "their defensive systems are activating. I'm reading massive power buildups throughout their hull. They're preparing for a quantum-level engagement." "Perfect," Admiral Martinez replied with grim satisfaction. "They're preparing for the wrong kind of fight. Phoenix, you are clear for EMP deployment. All other vessels, prepare to exploit the window." The Phoenix broke away from the main formation, its primitive chemical thrusters pushing the vessel directly toward the enemy ship's central hull section, where Queen Lasar's intelligence indicated the probability engine was located. Enemy fire intensified, but the alien weapons continued to have difficulty tracking a target that registered as little more than a flying chunk of metal and chemicals. General Thompson strapped himself into his command chair as the ship bucked and rolled under increasingly accurate enemy fire. The aliens were learning to compensate for their targeting difficulties, but they were learning too slowly. "Engineering, charge the EMP device. All hands, prepare for electromagnetic pulse deployment." In the ship's heavily shielded cargo bay, Dr. Vasquez's electromagnetic pulse weapon reached full charge. The device was crude by modern standards, essentially a massive coil of conductive wire wrapped around a chemical explosive designed to compress a magnetic field to impossible levels before releasing it in a single, devastating burst. It would destroy the Phoenix in the process, but if their theories were correct, it would also disrupt the quantum fields that kept the enemy vessel in its reality-distorted state. "Target acquired," announced the weapons officer, sighting through a manual telescope that wouldn't have been out of place on a historical warship. "Range, 50 kilometers, and closing." "Fire," Thompson ordered. The Phoenix launched its payload, a simple ballistic projectile containing the most primitive weapon in humanity's arsenal wrapped around enough explosives to level a city. The enemy vessel's defensive systems detected the incoming object, but their sophisticated quantum interceptors were designed to stop energy weapons and quantum torpedoes, not a chunk of metal flying through space on a ballistic trajectory. The EMP device detonated against the enemy ship's hull with the force of a small nuclear weapon. The electromagnetic pulse that followed wasn't sophisticated or elegant. It was simply overwhelming. Trillions of watts of electromagnetic energy flooded through every conductive surface of the alien vessel, shorting out quantum processors that had never been designed to handle such crude interference. For the first time in eons, the crystalline beings aboard the ship experienced something they had forgotten existed: vulnerability. The probability engine that allowed them to manipulate reality flickered and died. Defensive systems that had operated by rewriting the laws of physics suddenly found themselves bound by conventional limitations. The massive vessel, no longer existing partially outside normal space-time, became subject to the physics that govern the rest of the universe. "Direct hit!" shouted Captain Chun Wei from his position aboard the fast attack craft Mercury. "The target's energy signatures are fluctuating wildly. Whatever you did, it worked." Admiral Martinez felt a surge of fierce satisfaction as sensor readings confirmed what they had all hoped for. The enemy vessel was vulnerable. "All ships, execute attack pattern Omega. Hit them with everything we've got." What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded history. 11 human vessels, armed with weapons that were ancient by galactic standards, opened fire on a ship that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. Chemical explosive missiles streaked through space on simple ballistic trajectories. Railgun projectiles, accelerated by nothing more sophisticated than electromagnetic coils, punched through hull plating that had been designed to deflect reality itself, but had never been tested against simple kinetic impact. The Constitution, humanity's heavy weapons platform, unleashed a barrage of depleted uranium projectiles that struck the enemy vessel like the hammers of gods. Each impact sent shockwaves through the alien ship's structure, shattering crystalline formations that had existed since before Earth-Sun was born. But the humans weren't just attacking. Even as they poured fire into the enemy vessel, rescue shuttles launched from every ship in the task force. These craft, stripped of all advanced technology and operating on chemical thrusters, began docking with the alien ship at points where hull breaches had been created by their primitive weapons. Captain Maria Santos led the first assault team through a gaping hole in the enemy ship's hull, her squad armed with chemical projectile weapons and wearing pressure suits that relied on simple life support systems. What they found inside defied description. The interior of the alien vessel seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Corridors twisted through impossible geometries, and gravity operated according to rules that changed from moment to moment. But with their reality manipulation systems offline, the crystalline beings who crewed the ship found themselves as disoriented as the humans. "This way," Santos ordered, following the navigation data that Queen Lysura had transmitted. The holding areas were located deep within the ship's core, in sections that had been designed to be impregnable. But their defenses relied on quantum locks and probability barriers that no longer functioned. Santos and her team fought their way through corridors filled with crystalline beings who seemed more confused than hostile. These entities, accustomed to existing as pure energy, found themselves forced into physical form by the ship's disabled systems. Their attacks, when they came, were clumsy and ineffective compared to their usual reality-bending assaults. The rescue teams reached the holding areas to find thousands of Zephyrians in various states of consciousness, all contained within energy fields that flickered and wavered without the ship's quantum processors to maintain them. Queen Lysura was among the first to be freed, her neural crown immediately establishing contact with her people and coordinating their evacuation. "General Thompson," came her voice over the human communication network, transmitted through the primitive radio systems that the aliens still couldn't jam. "I cannot express the gratitude of my people. Your arrival was perfectly timed. Thank us when we're all safely away from here." Thompson replied from his emergency escape pod, the Phoenix having been destroyed in its suicide run. "How much time do we have before they can restore their systems?" Queen Lysura consulted the readings from her neural crown, which was interfacing with the ship's damaged computer networks. "Perhaps 30 minutes before they can restore basic functionality." "But, General, there's something else. This ship contains more than just my people. They've been collecting specimens from across the galaxy, enslaving entire civilizations. There are thousands of beings here from dozens of different species." The scope of the rescue operation suddenly expanded beyond anything the humans had planned for. Admiral Martinez made a command decision that would define humanity's place in galactic politics for generations to come. "All ships, modify rescue operations. We're evacuating everyone. Leave no sentient being in enemy hands." What followed was a logistical miracle born of desperation and human stubbornness. Shuttle after shuttle launched from the crippled alien vessel, packed beyond capacity with refugees from across the galaxy. Species that had been myths and legends in human databases found themselves being carried to safety by beings they had never heard of. But time was running short. Deep within the alien vessel, crystalline engineers worked frantically to restore their probability engine. Backup systems that had lain dormant for eons slowly came online, and the ship's reality distortion fields began to flicker back to life. "Admiral," came Dr. Park's voice, tight with tension, "I'm reading power surges throughout the enemy vessel. They're trying to bring their main systems back online." "How long?" Martinez asked, watching as the last shuttles departed the alien ship's docking bays. "Minutes, maybe less. Once they restore their probability engine, they'll be able to repair all damage instantaneously, and their weapons will be fully operational again." The human task force found itself in a desperate race against time. Overloaded shuttles limped toward the human vessels while enemy systems flickered back to life around them. The crystalline beings, no longer disoriented by their forced physical existence, began organizing more effective resistance. "Last shuttle away," reported Captain Santos as her vessel cleared the alien ship's hull. "All rescue teams accounted for." "Then it's time to leave," Admiral Martinez announced. "All ships, emergency departure. Maximum burn, any heading that takes us away from here." The human fleet scattered like leaves before a storm, their primitive but reliable chemical thrusters pushing them away from the alien vessel as fast as their engines could manage. Behind them, the massive ship began to shimmer as its probability engine approached full power restoration. But as the humans fled, Queen Lysara transmitted one final message through her neural crown's quantum communicator, a message directed not at the human fleet, but at Zephyrian colonies throughout the galaxy. The transmission contained complete technical specifications for human weapons and tactics, along with a simple declaration: "The humans have shown us the way to victory. Spread this knowledge to all free peoples. The time of hiding is over." Across the galaxy, in 1,000 star systems where enslaved species had despaired of ever seeing freedom again, Queen Lysara's message arrived like a beacon of hope. The great enemy could be defeated, not with advanced technology or sophisticated weapons, but with the simple, stubborn courage that seemed to be humanity's greatest gift to the universe. As Task Force Longshot made its escape, carrying refugees from dozens of worlds towards safety, none of them could know that their desperate gamble had sparked the beginning of the greatest liberation movement in galactic history. The war for freedom was just beginning, and humanity had given the galaxy its first taste of victory. 6 months after the rescue of Queen Lysara and the liberation of the alien prisoner ship, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. Earth's primitive weapons technology, once considered laughably backward by advanced civilizations, had become the most sought-after military knowledge in known space. What humans called dumb weapons, chemical explosives, kinetic projectiles, and electromagnetic devices, had proven to be the key to defeating an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. Admiral Sarah Martinez stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed orbital station Liberation, watching as ships from dozens of different species arrived for what historians would later call the First Galactic Liberation Council. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, combining human structural techniques with Zephyrian quantum materials and technologies from species that had been freed from the crystalline entity's prison ship. "Admiral," came a familiar voice behind her. Queen Lysara approached with the flowing grace that characterized her species, but there was something different about her now. Where once she had carried herself with the serene confidence of a ruler whose people had known peace, now she moved with the purposeful determination of someone who had seen the worst the universe could offer and had chosen to fight against it. "Your Majesty," Martinez replied, inclining her head in the gesture of respect that had become standard between their two species. "I trust the final preparations for the Council are proceeding smoothly?" "Indeed they are. Representatives from 47 star systems have confirmed attendance, with more arriving daily. The thermal collective of the Rigel system transmitted their acceptance just this morning, along with specifications for their new human-inspired weapon systems. Lysara gestured toward the viewport, where a massive vessel was approaching the station. Its hull bore the distinctive crystalline formations of Zephyrian construction, but the weapon ports that studded its surface contained devices that would have been familiar to any human military engineer: railguns, missile launchers, and electromagnetic pulse generators. The flagship Human's Gift, Lysara explained with a smile that still held traces of the grief she felt for her people's losses. Built according to hybrid specifications that combine our engineering capabilities with your tactical innovations. It can deploy weapons systems that are completely invisible to crystalline technology while maintaining our defensive capabilities. Martinez nodded approvingly. The ship represented something unprecedented in galactic history. A vessel designed specifically to fight enemies who could manipulate reality itself, using weapons so primitive that advanced targeting systems couldn't even lock onto them effectively. And the other species? Martinez asked. How are they adapting to our tactical doctrines? Better than we had dared hope. The Aquatic Collective has developed underwater versions of your chemical explosive devices that can be deployed by their biomechanical submarines. The Silicon Coalition has created kinetic projectile weapons that fire crystallized minerals at velocities approaching light speed. Even the energy beings of the Nebula Consortium have learned to generate focused electromagnetic pulses that can disrupt quantum-based systems. As they spoke, Dr. James Park emerged from a nearby lift, his arms full of data tablets, and his expression showing the intense focus that had become his trademark during the resistance planning phase. As Earth's chief AI researcher, he had become the primary coordinator for spreading human military technology throughout the galaxy. "Admiral, Your Majesty," he said, nodding to both leaders, "I have the final intelligence reports from our reconnaissance missions to the crystalline entity's home territories. The news is both encouraging and terrifying." Park activated a holographic display that showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy's spiral arms. Dozens of red markers indicated known crystalline strongholds, while green indicators showed systems that had been liberated using human-inspired tactics. The good news is that our strategy is working beyond our wildest expectations. In every engagement where Allied forces have used primitive weapons technology, the crystalline entities have suffered defeats. They simply cannot adapt to enemies who fight using principles that predate their technological development. He paused, highlighting several systems near the galactic core where the red markers clustered most densely. The terrifying news is that we've confirmed the existence of at least 300 crystalline vessels of the same class as the ship we engaged at Zephyros. Each one is capable of enslaving entire star systems. We're not dealing with a small fleet of raiders. We're facing an empire that has been harvesting civilizations for millions of years. The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. The rescue mission that had seemed so desperate and unlikely just months ago had been revealed as merely the opening move in a war that dwarfed anything in galactic history. "How many species have they enslaved?" Queen Lysara asked, though her expression suggested she dreaded the answer. Conservative estimates suggest at least 10,000 distinct species across 5,000 star systems. They've been operating for so long that some of their prisoner ships contain species whose homeworlds were destroyed before humanity had even developed agriculture. Admiral Martinez felt a familiar surge of the anger that had driven her through 30 years of military service. But this was different. This was rage at an injustice so vast that it challenged comprehension. An entire galaxy's worth of beings living in slavery because their technology had advanced beyond the point where they could fight back effectively. "Then, we better get to work," she said simply. "How long before the council session begins?" "1 hour," Lysara replied. "Representatives from every liberated system will be present, along with delegates from species that are still under crystalline control but have managed to maintain secret communications with the resistance." The three leaders made their way to the council chamber, a vast spherical room designed to accommodate beings with radically different environmental needs. Atmospheric barriers maintained distinct environments for aquatic species, while gravity fields were adjusted to accommodate everything from a massive, low-gravity adapted titans to the microscopic collective intelligences that communicated through coordinated swarms. As they entered, Martinez was struck by the sheer diversity of the assembled beings. Species that had been legends in human databases sat beside others that had never been encountered before their liberation from crystalline prison ships. The common thread that united them all was a shared determination to ensure that no other species would suffer the fate they had endured. General Marcus Thompson approached the leadership group, moving with the confidence of someone who had spent the past 6 months training alien military forces in the art of primitive warfare. His artificial leg had been replaced with a newer model that incorporated Zephyrian biomechanical technology, giving him mobility that surpassed his original biological limb. "Admiral," he reported, "our latest training programs have graduated over 10,000 alien officers in human tactical doctrine. More importantly, we've established production facilities in 37 star systems for manufacturing the kinds of weapons systems that crystalline technology can't counter." "Resistance networks?" Martinez asked, expanding daily. "The beauty of our approach is that the crystalline entities can't monitor or interfere with primitive communication methods. Species that have been cut off from their own people for decades are re-establishing contact using radio transmissions, optical signals, and even simple messenger services." Queen Lysara stepped forward as the assembled delegates turned their attention to the leadership group. Her neural crown, now enhanced with human-designed communication technology, allowed her to address the entire gathering simultaneously in their own languages. "Representatives of the free galaxy," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "6 months ago, my people faced extinction at the hands of an enemy we thought invincible. Today, we gather as equals in a coalition that grows stronger with each passing day." The response from the assembled delegates was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Species that had known nothing but subjugation for millennia found themselves part of a movement that offered genuine hope for liberation. "But we must be honest about the challenges ahead," Lysara continued. "Our enemies are ancient, powerful, and ruthless. They will not surrender their dominion without a fight that will test every alliance and strain every resource we can muster." Admiral Martinez stepped forward to address the gathering. "However, they have one weakness that we have learned to exploit. They've become so dependent on their reality manipulation technology that they've forgotten how to fight conventional warfare. Every primitive weapon we deploy, every simple tactic we employ, every straightforward strategy we implement gives us an advantage they cannot counter." Dr. Park activated the holographic display, showing the galaxy-wide tactical situation. "Our intelligence indicates that the crystalline entities are beginning to recognize the threat we pose. They're consolidating their forces and preparing for a large-scale offensive designed to crush the resistance before it can spread further." The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The liberation movement had grown powerful enough to threaten the crystalline empire, which meant the empire would soon move to destroy it. General Thompson spoke into the silence, "Which is exactly what we want them to do. Every force they consolidate is a force that's not oppressing enslaved populations. Every resource they dedicate to fighting us is a resource they can't use to harvest new civilizations. We're going to force them into the kind of straightforward, large-scale military engagement they're least equipped to handle." Over the following hours, the assembled delegates worked out the details of what would become known as Operation Galactic Dawn. The plan was audacious in scope and simple in execution. Allied forces would simultaneously attack crystalline strongholds throughout the galaxy, forcing the enemy to spread their forces thin while dealing with enemies they couldn't effectively target. The key to success lay in coordination using the most primitive communication methods available: radio transmissions, optical signals, and Even messenger ships would carry orders across the galaxy, creating a communications network so basic that crystalline jamming technology couldn't interfere with it. Each attack would be carried out using weapons that predated quantum technology. Chemical explosives, kinetic projectiles, electromagnetic pulses, and in some cases, simple directed energy weapons that operated on principles the crystalline entities had long forgotten. The beauty of this strategy, explained Dr. Park to the assembled military commanders, is that our enemies will be facing the equivalent of a galactic rebellion fought with stone axes and catapults. Their sophisticated defensive systems will be useless against weapons they can't properly analyze or predict. As the council session concluded, representatives from across the galaxy returned to their ships carrying detailed plans for the liberation offensive. Each species would adapt the human tactical doctrine to their own capabilities and environments, creating a coordinated assault that would be unlike anything in galactic history. Queen Lysara found herself standing once again on the observation deck of Liberation Station, watching as the assembled fleet departed for their home systems. Admiral Martinez joined her, both leaders understanding that they had just set in motion events that would determine the fate of every sentient being in the galaxy. "Do you think we can actually win?" Lysara asked, her voice carrying the weight of responsibility for billions of lives. Martinez was quiet for long moments before answering. "Your Majesty, 6 months ago, a small human task force armed with primitive weapons rescued you from a ship that could manipulate reality itself. Today, that same primitive technology has become the foundation for a galactic liberation movement. If we can do that, I think we can do anything." As the last ships disappeared into the starfield, both leaders knew that the real war was just beginning. But for the first time in galactic history, enslaved species across the universe had something they had thought lost forever: hope. And that hope bore a distinctly human stamp, forged from stubborn determination, creative thinking, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. The crystalline entities had ruled the galaxy for eons through technological superiority and the manipulation of reality itself. But they were about to learn something that every enemy of humanity had discovered throughout history. Sometimes the most primitive weapons, wielded with enough courage and determination, could topple the mightiest empire. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the storm that would decide whether the age of enslavement would end or whether the brief flame of rebellion would be extinguished forever. But in systems throughout the spiral arms, beings who had forgotten what freedom felt like began cleaning chemical projectile weapons and checking radio transmitters, preparing to show their ancient oppressors that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. The war for galactic liberation had begun, and it would be fought with weapons that the greatest military minds in the universe had dismissed as hopelessly primitive. In the end, that would prove to be exactly the advantage the free peoples of the galaxy needed.